Good people, welcome back. Let's proceed with our lessons on Python. So basically, we've just finished print functions. So let's get started with basically dynamic and static typing. Yeah, so basically what we're trying to mean by this is the instance whereby as a programmer you'd want to pass any type. For example, when our parameters, right? We can have integers and strings and the likes. So basically, okay, we have the parameters and the arguments. So here we are talking about when you're passing the data type as an argument, right? You've already defined the parameters. Now you're passing it as an argument. So right here, when you talk about what we'd like to cover here is whereby you'd like to pass any type of object as an argument, right? I hope you've seen how we've been able to pass arguments before. We've defined parameters, but then now we're passing arguments to functions, right? So let's say an example. Let's say you have a function add x and y, x, y. These are parameters, right? So when you want to return, right, you're going to return. Okay, this is an example. So basically, you're going to return x plus y, right? X plus y. So when you go to print here, print the function name is add, then you pass our arguments 5 and 10. These are integers, right? In our next passing, we want to pass print add we'd like to pass let's say string, so u and comma. So here we passed two strings, right? We've been able to concatenate you and me, and then 5 and 10. So basically, right here we're passing different data types across this parameter, right? So we have different arguments across that parameter. So we can add 5 and 10, which returns 15. Then we can add you and me, which we can add you, which returns you and me, or you can have a name, your first name and your last name, which returns both together. So I hope that's clear. We can function 10 dot yeah. So basically we have a full color right here. I keep forgetting. Let's do Python function 10 you me. Okay, I usually hide you and me. Let's see. Yeah, right now it's super. So you've seen we have been able to pass integers, we've been able to pass strings as well, and we have had them being the return statement being the addition of both. Basically, we've merged them both, right? So we've been able to merge them both, right? Okay. So this behavior, what do we call this behavior? So let's talk about polymorphism, right? So this is the behavior, the functions behavior. It's a functions behavior of adding together, adding together different types. As we just have seen, basically we've defined what we've just seen right here and in our example right here. So basically that's what we call polymorphism, right? It's good to understand the meaning and know how to use it. Excuse me. So that's a functions behavior, whereby we are able to add two different types, right? So it's an inherent part in Python. The polymorphism is an inherent. For example, let's consider whereby we're doing a multiplication, right? So this is multiplication, right? The two operands are numbers. Then the result is the product of those two numbers, right? If one product of the operand is a string, right? So basically, in multiplication, right? In multiplication, we say a string, integer multiplied by integer is equals to an integer, right? Out of an instance whereby we have a string multiplied by an integer, right? So in this instance, if we had something like, let's say we had a string being x, right? X multiplied by 5, right? This is just this is what we have here. I'm just adding to. So this will show x 5 times, right? Basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That'll be the result. I hope that's clear. In that for the polymorphism, right? If we have basically the addition works well, we can be able to do polymorphism of strings, integers, and the likes. But in multiplication, if we have the data types being different, then the output might be different as well. I hope that makes sense. So Python uses dynamic typing. This is used to do what? Someone may ask. This is used in determining type of object. We did say initially, when you create a variable, Python by its own self creates an object until we have an output, and the object can be destroyed. So Python uses dynamic typing in determining the type of object as program executes. What I just said. So if an example, how do this come? An example, a consecutive number is equals to 5 and number is equals to a string of 7, right? Num is equals to 5. This is a integer. Num is equals to 7, right? How do Python determine object of the num, of the variable name num, right? So the first assign this one with an integer and then a string type, right? So the type of num, the variable here we have here can change depending on the value it references. So basically this will change depending on the value. Now the value will be used to will depend on the value it references. So we'll have the key and the value it references. Okay? So that's clear. In that right here we have both of them being num of integer, then it of being a string. So the value will change depend the type will change depending on the value it represents. I hope that makes sense. Excuse me. So the interpreter is responsible for checking all the operations are valid and program executes. If we are doing 5, right? Now here's where we're doing add. We are calling the add function initially ahead, and then we are passing 5 integer and then a string of 100, right? What happens here? Normally in this instance, now that we have an integer and a string, right? We have an integer here and a string right here. So what happens? This one, this will generate an error because we are adding a string to integer. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. So this, because we don't have the same, had it been an integer, we'd have a correct output, but because we have an integer and a string, we'll have an error because the interpreter, which is responsible for checking, it will check the operations. It will check before it is being evaluated. So it will check the types, because it's a string, that integer and a string. The output will to load an error. Adding, sorry. Yeah. So we have something called dynamic typing. So this is we have said Python uses dynamic typing. So we have something else called apart from dynamic typing, right? We have something called static typing. So what happens here? So we have other languages that uses this. This one, it requires programmer to define the type of every variable. How does that make sense? So we have something called dynamic typing, which Python uses, and we have something called static typing. This requires a programmer to determine or to define the type of every variable and basically every function parameter. Hope that makes sense. So example, if you want to use a string, so we want to string name is equals to John. This will declare a string variable in C. Okay. Basically that's a C in C++. So this basically is used in Java, C, CPP, and Java. Yeah, I hope that's clear. So we go back to our dynamic typing, and then we say basically, because that's what we're mostly going to use. With that, we're able to have more flexibility. So that's the importance of dynamic typing. It allows basically allows more flexibility. Also flexibility of code. Yeah. Now this will also now at a cost. So this will come at a cost, right? So at a cost of more bugs. So we will have to deal with more bugs, despite being flexible. It will have more bugs on this. So that's it with our polymorphism introduction and our typing types introduction. I hope we have got to understand something small here, and I hope that makes sense to in our introduction to functions and function typing. So maybe a question here. A polymorphism refers to how an operation depends on the involved object types. That's true. Basically, object types are mostly used in polymorphism, right? Just as we described here, object types really matters. If it's a string in mostly strings, mostly same data types works together quite well, right? I hope that's it for our dynamic typing. So in Python we're using dynamic typing. We can't use static typing, because in static typing the programmer will have to define the type, but in Python we don't define the type we use. So that's where the difference between static typing and dynamic typing. So in Python we're going to use dynamic typing. That's it for this topic. Let's meet in the next one. We can do more examples. In case you have any question, let me know in the comment section. Thank you for your time. See you in a bit.